Welcome to Series 3 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew, author of 3 novels, and someone who's interested in how other writers write, why they do it, and the fun or joy they get from their writing. I'm joined today by author, journalist, and creative writing tutor Lizzie Enfield to discuss her latest book, which is called Finish Your Book, How to Complete Your Half-Written Novel. So, Lizzie, your book, Finish Your Book, will be of great help, I'm sure, to a great many writers. What was your motivation for writing it?
Well, it was actually, my initial inspiration was a tweet from a friend and colleague he tweeted, "I'm sitting in a cafe starting to write my novel," and he was followed by a lot of other journalists, and he got a lot of replies saying, "I started to write a novel, I got 30,000 words in, I got 50,000 words in, I never finished it." Yes. And that sort of just caught my eye, that particular tweet. I looked at it and thought, oh, he's writing a novel, is he? And then sort of saw this and I thought, well, actually that was also my own experience when I worked as a journalist and worked at the BBC, and there's an old Peter Cook joke that I can't quite remember, but it's something like, someone saying to someone at a party, "I'm writing my novel," and they kind of reply, "So aren't I?" And I suppose it's also, so it's a little bit of that, of my 2 worlds of work, which are journalism and writing and teaching creative writing. And then just from also my own teaching, seeing, I suppose there are a lot of courses to help you start writing, and and people are generally, without diminishing their achievements, but it's, I suppose, slightly easier when you've got a certain amount of hand-holding, which a structured course gives you. Yes. And it's that point afterwards when you sort of feel, well, I've done really, really well, which people have. I've written 50,000 words. That's great, but it's not quite a proper book and it's not quite finished and I've got a bit stuck. So it was really to breach that gap in the market, and I'd been toying with the idea for quite a long time since I first saw this tweet. And then really it was lockdown, which actually the effect that lockdown had on me was to throw me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, slightly out of kilter, and I found it quite hard to write myself. But I didn't want the time just to vanish, so I thought, well, I'm going to do this now then. And there's just one other thing that I would say in answer to that question, but it was also something that came out in a conversation with someone, was that I do, sort of see a lot of students, have got quite a lot of friends now who are also writers. Mm. And I was talking to someone and they said, you've got a lot of stories, really, anecdotes about other writers and what they've done, and I kind of wanted to share that, really, because I think it's quite often when you go to a literary festival or a writers' conference or something and you see writers speaking, we want to obviously all appear quite competent, I suppose. I'm sure you're the same, and as if it's all effortless, and really I thought it's not, and I wanted to give people that sort of encouragement by saying, look, all these people found it hard as well, but there are little things and tips that along the way that you can pick up that make it easier just to sort of give yourself that final push and to finish.
I think that's a very good point, about you go along and you listen to an author, a famous writer, and you think, well, all I need to do is listen to how they cracked it and repeat that. But it's nothing like that at all.
Nothing like that at all. And a good example that I had of that scenario really once was I was giving a talk at Winchester Writers' Festival. Yeah. And that was about polishing and perfecting a draft. So it was aimed at writers who'd got a draft and to get it ready to pitch and publish. And for that session, I wanted to show them how very different a first draft is to a final polished draft, to reassure them, to make anyone that was sort of, has written a whole novel even and was going, but it's not quite good enough, to go, everyone feels that. And I asked quite a lot of writer friends, have you got a bit of a first draft of a book that's now published that I can borrow a few pages of or have and show to people? And they all said no.
Yeah.
They were all like, oh, no, I don't, And the reason that they said that is because that gap between, a first draft is so wide that nobody, when they've had some success, really wants to go, look, I was as bad. This was quite bad. In the end, I ended up having to show them my own, which I didn't really want to do either. But I thought I do want to make that point that, what you see published of mine is quite far removed from what I first started with, and the work on that has brought it to that stage. And I wanted that just to be encouraging rather than just making me look bad.
Definitely. I mean, that's another thing. A book is not written from page 1 to the end. It's written out of order. It's written in multiple drafts. The first draft is the hardest, perhaps, because you've just got to get your ideas down, and then you start work, and that can actually be the most sort of pleasurable bit. So again, a lot of aspiring writers and even experienced writers, because you're right, you need to remember that all writers find it hard.
Yeah, and what you were saying about, it looks like what looks like a finished novel has been through all of those drafts, and there is a kind of, even all the things that you're supposed to do that you don't quite do, but you don't realise that people don't do them as it says in the textbooks. So, kind of plotting is quite a good example, because I know a lot of people find it very hard to plot thoroughly, and they kind of have this, I could finish my novel, I know that I could finish it if I just sat down and plotted it, but then they think, I'm still not quite sure. And that's a very typical thing, that when you pick up a finished book, it looks like it's been meticulously plotted, and you think it was probably a sprawling mess to begin with, and there's quite a lot of reverse engineering that goes into that you said yourself when we were talking earlier, you completely changed the ending of a novel.
Yes.
And a friend of mine did that recently. Her agent said, I want a different ending. And then you go backwards and have to rework it all. And of course, to the reader, it looks like, well, they must have planned all of that to begin with. But you haven't. And it's not seeing that work.
It's a lovely illusion. And I was thinking, many people have the 30,000, 50,000 words. They've stalled. They don't know how to carry on. But in a way, they shouldn't be so surprised, because there's not many books that land in your brain fully formed, and all you have to do is write them out.
No, of course they do.
You have to work with them. You have to look at what you've written, and you look at your characters, who, if you want plot-driven fiction, they're the first, port of call, and you have to ask them. And I know there's a lot of contention about talking to your characters, but you've got to say, well, what really would be happening now?
Yes, and it's not just a question of asking them. It's I think it's understanding, because people talk about the characters driving the novel and running away with it.
Yeah.
But I often think it's asking yourself how the character that you have created would behave. And that's quite often where you get a contradiction between the character you've created and the thing that you planned for them to do.
Yes.
And maybe you've warmed to them, so you've sort of thought, okay, 3/4 of the way in, they're going to murder their mother. But then as you've been writing them, you've thought, actually, they're not that person, or something less dramatic even, but they're going to cheat on their husband, or they're going to steal from work, and whatever it is, you think, actually, I haven't built up to that. And that's one of the, sort of things that I say about plotting, is you have to think, not, do I need someone to be found dead in the back garden for the sake of my plot? And therefore, am I sending someone out to kind of kill someone in the back garden? But that's all got to be credible. So I think that's the thing about characters. It's not so much that they're shaping the novel, but that what they do has to be believable. So you're still in control, going, this is what I want to happen. But if your characters aren't going to do it, you've got to sort of allow them to take back control, I suppose.
Yes. So I suppose it's a little bit like improv theatre, where you're the director of the play, and you've given your characters a lot of leeway. They're not following a set script, but they have to do things believable in their character.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. And I think all too often people have decided what the plot is, and then the characters are in, and they think, no, that's not really going to work.
Yes. Of all the advice and your experience with adult students in creative writing at Arvon and Brighton, what advice do you think, normally gets a glimmer in their eyes, that sort of light bulb moment, whether that's hit home?
I think quite often it's the very simple things, but sometimes it's giving people just permission for things that they sort of know themselves. And I think when you're sort of dealing with the big themes like character development or dialogue or plotting, they will take all of that in and follow that. But quite often people are very nervous of giving themselves permission to do things like you mentioned, writing out of order, and that's a very common one, or starting again. So quite often they'll have written 50,000 words and then they're stuck, and I say, do you know the ending? And they'll kind of go, yes. Have you written it? No, because I haven't written the bit in the middle. And that's really just giving them permission, saying you can write the ending, you can go backwards and do it. Giving up is another thing, or actually just trying to write the book. And this is actually something that students do often get, the light bulb moment, but it often takes quite a long time to come. And I think that is one of the things one of the downsides of a collective creative writing course, is that people are quite often influenced by their peers. And I've certainly seen, so I think that telling people to write the novel that they really want to write, that really speaks to them. And I definitely there's one student who I cite in the book who was writing a literary novel, or trying to write a literary novel, and she kept coming in, and every week when I would sort of say, bring in a book that you enjoy reading, it was always a crime novel, it was always a real page-turning thriller. And about a third of the way into the course she said, I'm not really enjoying writing this novel, but everybody else said they were writing a literary novel. And I said, you don't have to do that, write a crime novel. And then she sort of got to grips with it and started writing the crime novel, and it all came very quickly. And I think we all have that to a certain extent. I mean, I think every author does. You sort of want to be the best, and it's quite hard, and you set the bar very hard, and it's quite hard saying, actually, I want to write to this particular market, and I want to use my strengths, and I want to write to my strengths, and that might not mean, it might mean I'm going to write a very slim literary volume, and not a bestseller. And bestsellers are notoriously difficult to write. They look easy, but they're hard. But I think that's one of my main. It's one of those things of saying you can write actually what you want to write, and that sounds so simple, but people are often influenced by a myriad of other reasons, and they don't do that, and they'll start on something, and also to start again. If it's not working, you can start again.
Yes, that's very good advice indeed. I mean, there are some projects you take on where one day you should just think, no, I think that's the end of that. We'll move on. I've got a much better idea now. I like your idea about students, writers giving themselves permission to try things. And certainly for me, I've found that writing is so much about discovery. Discover what you want to write, how you're going to write, what you're going to end up with, but just write something good. Yeah,
and it's allowing for it to change as well. And that's another thing which is about permission, that people will start out saying, this is what I thought, and then the characters will take on their own life or start different things, or they'll read a book and want to take it, or see a film or just something, and you think it is an organic process. So it's really driving home that message that it's an organic process, and what you started out with is going to take on something that you had no idea what it was going to become, and you can do that and accept that and go with it. You're not it's getting that balance between what you control and what you don't control, really.
Yes, I think too often people have one eye on the best-selling charts, or the books in the bookshop which are on prominent display, and they think, I've got this urge to write something, I'll write one of these, and that's just not such a great idea.
No, and the other thing that I think is, which sort of it underlines that really, but I think it's something that people find very hard to begin with, and is to allow yourself to really put yourself into the novel, to allow yourself to filter through into it. And I think that's something that especially when people are starting out, when it's their first novel, it's very hard not to look around you, not to be influenced by other people, and to really, put your stamp on it and go, this is me, this is what I'm putting into it. And that is always, the best work. So it's sort of allowing that to happen. But the other thing, when you talked about the sort of, the most useful thing, and it is this sort of 30,000, 50,000 word block, the most useful thing I think that comes out of this is people very often just put too much in to begin with, and they've sort of got the whole story. So where they get stuck is because they've given away the whole story in the first 30,000 or 50,000 words, and they know that there's a kind of magic number of 80,000 or 100,000 that makes it a novel, but they've got nothing more to say. And it's that just unpacking things more slowly. And I think that is usually one of the most light bulb moments, when I say it's all there, but you've just given it all away in the first chapter. Sometimes it's just slowing down.
So they exactly, slow down, have a deep look at what you've written, and really take it apart and sort of grow it up again, as it were.
And I think people get distracted, and I mean, I'm sure that you've found this, but I've just been reading your novel, and you've got a very distinctive style, a very distinctive voice. And I think that is something that it takes people a while to find, and then they start looking around. When they found it, they start looking around and going, well, Hemingway didn't write like this, or Hilary Mantel doesn't write like this. And it's having that confidence to go, no, this is my voice, this is what I'm doing, and I'm carrying on with this, and I'm sticking to it, and people will grow to love it or pick it up and love it.
That's excellent advice, brilliant advice. I mean, yes, why are you doing this? Why are you bothering to write a book at all? You don't want to write a clone or a pastiche. It wouldn't get published, I'm sure. But that's one of the fun things about writing, is to discover yourself and write what you can in your own distinctive way.
Yeah, and the other thing is, obviously, when you say, why are you writing the book in the first place? And this again, it sounds so simple that it sounds ridiculous almost to mention it, but it is the storytelling. And that is something that again, it hinders people, because quite often they'll get so caught up in the actual writing and some of the constructs of the writing and the style and a scene or something, and then when you say, what's the book about, what's the story you're trying to tell, that will somehow get lost. So that's one thing that I really emphasize is, keep reminding yourself actually what the story is, and what that excitement of the story is, and what it is that people are going to pick up and go, oh, this sounds interesting, I want to read it. And very often, myself included, you suddenly get bogged down in a bit of it's going to be set here, and I've got to do all the research here, and you forget what the story is, and that's what people are picking it up and wanting to read it for. And that is also what you set out to do, to sort of to tell a story.
That's right. You set out to formulate the continuous fictive dream, and you're not writing a thesis or an explanation or a rant. You're trying to fool the reader to come along into this fictional world. I'll tell you a great story, and you'll have fun.
And all of that might come into it.
Yeah.
The thesis and the exploration and the rant might be part of it, but it's still a story, isn't it?
Exactly.
So still, as you say, you're saying, come into this world. We're going to rant a bit along the way, but there's going to be you're going to meet some people, and they're going to be interesting, and you're going to wonder what's going to happen to them, and it'll all be tied up at the end. Your time won't be wasted.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, I hope that hits home with listeners and readers of the book. It's all good advice. You've got so much good advice there, and one bit I liked particularly was the quote from Oscar Wilde, which was about humanity never had a roadmap to follow, but it's sort of got there in the end, and it's still going. And I think that's a really nice illustration of how a writer works.
Yeah, and you have to allow for serendipity, and And that, I think when we talked before, it's that waiting for that magic to strike, and there's nothing you can do about that, really. You can't force it, but it's being patient and knowing that it will come. And I think that's something that is much easier for second time writers. I think if you've got one book out of the way, sometimes it's not, but it is something that, you know, every author on their fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever novel will sort of have a draft, and it will be lackluster. And it's just, but then you have the knowledge that at some point something will strike and you'll think, oh, if I just do this or just add this theme or this storyline, that will lift it. And that's quite hard when you're starting out, kind of thinking, I'm telling this story but it's not really singing. And something comes in, and that's really the only way I know how to describe it, is the sort of magic of it. And then that's not very helpful when you're a creative writing tutor, to go wait for the magic to strike like my wand. But it's just that something, and it's with that in all art forms, isn't it? It's, you know, you can paint by numbers, but you need something. And I think, I don't know if you've ever seen did you see the film about Turner?
I don't think I did.
There's a great scene in that, and that's that sort of magic of a painting when he's got one of his huge seascapes and they're hanging it on the walls of the Royal Academy for the summer exhibition, and he kind of comes, and it's already sort of takes the stepladder because it's quite high on the wall, and climbs up and adds one single splodge of red paint in the
That's right. And Constable saw it and then was realised who he's up against, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's that, you know, it's that it can be a tiny thing, but it's that splodge of red paint that makes it something, you know, lifts it, gives it something else. It's that sort of touch of magic.
Yeah, I mean, on magic, I think one thing that you would never really realise or believe was possible until you've got a lot of experience under you about writing, is that you will get to the point where you can sit down every day and write something. So, for example, I'm yet to do my daily write of 1,000 words. I have no clue whatsoever I'm going to be writing about. I just know that when I sit down and start thinking about it, something will come. And so that's sort of like advanced meta advice of, you know, if you keep going at this game, it does get easier because you get more skills.
And stuff comes, and you make two very important points there. It is that, you know, doing it regularly. And I always say to people, you know, it might not be every day, but if it's at least once or twice a week. But the other point you made in that sentence is it's the thinking time as well. And I kind of often say to people, if you absolutely can't, because you have to drive, you know, if you commute to the Outer Hebrides every day or something, and you're already getting up at 5 a.m, but you can think during that time, and it's that thinking time, so that when you sit down, and your goal 1,000 words a day, you know, that's quite an ambitious goal. I've sort of often say to people, if it's 250 words a day, or you have a big writing day at the weekend and it's 2,000 words on your big writing day, but as long as you keep it going and keep building it up and keep thinking about it. And I suppose that's the opposite of magic, because we talked about magic, and the opposite of that, and that sounds far more hippie-ish than I intend as well, because it is graft. And the other side of that is it is graft, and it is that sitting down and doing it no matter what, even if you don't feel like it, even if you end up with 1,000 words and you think they're no good, it won't write itself. So it's that combination of doing it and then keeping faith that even if it feels no good, that it will all come together at some point. And I also, on that point, know people who've gone back to drafts that have been no good, and they've gone back to them in 10 years' time and had that spark of, do you know what, if I do this with this novel and restructure it slightly, it will work. I know someone that's got a book out at the moment, actually, which is doing phenomenally well, and exactly that. This book was rejected by 10 publishers. It sat in a drawer for several years. She suddenly went, I'm going to restructure it, start at this point, do it like this, bring in some themes that were very important to her, and it was suddenly this, everybody's, you know, going mad about this novel. So it's
excellent.
I suppose it's a bit like wine as well. It's a long game. I'm looking at the bottle of wine behind you, but
this is all very true. I sense there's a sequel there. Finish your other book, number 2 in the series, because this book is full of great advice. It's going to be picked up by many writers. Advice is recommendation for further action or future action, and there's got to be lots of good things in here. So it was a pleasure to talk to you about it, and I look forward to talking to you again about reaction to the book and any other books you're writing. So thank you, Lizzie, so much.
Lovely talking to you too. Thank you, Mark.
In the next episode, I will be talking to Lizzie about the publication and marketing of her book and how she uses her own advice in writing book number 7. You can leave feedback on any of the episodes at podchaser.com/The Joy of Writing, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.